Hey everybody, welcome back. Now we talk a lot about the wildlife out here in the greater Yellowstone area, but one thing that we haven't touched on yet is the fact that all of the wildlife and everything that we're doing here is all being done on one of the largest volcanoes on the planet. Now, Yellowstone is most known for Old Faithful. It's the most famous geyser in the world. Over 4 million people a year come through here from around the world to see this. But what you may not know is that that's only one of over 10,000 different features here. Within the confines of the park, we've got over half of the geothermal features on the planet. So this is a really good opportunity to see all of them in one place. So today we're going to take you on a quick tour of the different geothermal features out here at Yellowstone National Park today on Intrepid Photography. Do you have a natural fascination with nature? Then come along with us as we explore some magnificent landscapes and captivating wildlife. My name is Tim and I'm a nature and wildlife photographer based here in western Wyoming, also a guide at Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Parks. You're invited to join us as we dive into the diverse and unique ecosystems of the greater Yellowstone area here on Intrepid Photography. So our trip begins as it normally does, and that's driving through the dark. Now, typically when you come out here, you're planning on spending a whole day. You want to get out here right at sunrise because there's always so much to see, especially if you're wanting to catch the wildlife. They're more active that first hour or so after the sun comes up. Now, most of the geothermal features are going to be between the southwest and along the western road of the park. But right now we're coming up along the western shore of Yellowstone Lake, heading up towards Hayden Valley. Now, you will find some really cool features out here. Once we get up here past the lake, there is a pretty good collection of geothermal stuff to see. One of the first things that you're going to run into outside of the various steam vents, fumaroles, and so forth that you see is what's called the Dragon's Mouth. And this is what I think is one of the coolest features out here. It's a little hot spring. And there is a cavern where you have a shifting tide of water that pulses out of this. And of course the steam venting out from that same little cavern. It is one of the most amazing looking spots in the park, period. And there's a couple different features out here. There's a little mud pot right down the way from it, right down the boardwalk. And we'll go into more detail about how these happen and what the mechanics are behind them. But right now, continuing a little bit further north down this road is the Sulfur Cauldron area. Now this is a really cool overlook where you can get out and stand right there on the roadside and look down into this small valley where there's all kinds of hot springs and fumaroles going off. You can really smell the sulfur coming out of the ground here, and you can hear the pressure of the steam coming out of the rocks. There is a fledgling mud pot down here as well. So this is just a really cool place just to pull over and kind of start to get a feel for the kind of things that you're going to see here. Now there's not a great deal more over here on the eastern side of the road. There are some spots as you're coming into Hayden Valley where there's a couple steam vents right off the Yellowstone River, and it's always a really good place to catch wildlife because you get to catch the wildlife with the active geothermal stuff, which always makes for some great photographs. Now as we're coming back and we pass Yellowstone Lake, there's even a little offshoot on the East Gate Road that you can take and see the fumaroles that are coming out of the hillside right there on the shores of Yellowstone Lake, which is always a real cool thing to see. Now moving west from Yellowstone Lake, we run into Old Faithful. And this gives us a really good opportunity to talk about the mechanics of how the geothermal features out here work. Essentially, we're over a volcanic hotspot here. And there's magma chambers that form under the ground. It comes much closer to the surface here, and it heats the rock above it. And then the groundwater will seep down, get superheated. And in the case of Old Faithful specifically, there is a chamber where the water collects underneath the ground. It heats, it hits a certain pressure, and there's only a 5-inch hole that actually breaks free and releases around 6,000 gallons of water roughly every 90 minutes. So the geyser will erupt, it releases all of the pressure, it seeps back down, the reservoir under there starts to fill up, the pressure starts to build again, and it's just on such a consistent basis that we can predict the eruptions typically within 10 minutes or so. So it's a really good opportunity for folks to get out and see a really sizable geyser. Now, this isn't the largest geyser in the park. Old Faithful, you might get up to about 150 feet with that one. Steamboat Geyser is much less reliable. You can still get to it and you can still hope to catch it, but it can go off everywhere from a couple times a month to a couple times a year. It's very unpredictable, but that one, when it does go, it's about twice the size of Old Faithful. Now there's an entire boardwalk in the area surrounding Old Faithful. Of course, there's the world famous Old Faithful Lodge there. But around this boardwalk, you can see all kinds of smaller geysers. You can sit there and watch them shoot up 5, 10, 20 feet and then drain back into the earth. It's the coolest thing to sit there and watch. You can also get up close and personal with a lot of the smaller hot springs, and you can see how the heat and the acidity of the water interacts with the rocks and the minerals in that area, and it forms just some amazing, gorgeous little structures where this water is constantly heated underground and then pushed up through cracks in the earth to form these pools that will overflow, and you'll get these warm streams and creeks running off of it, all draining into the surrounding waterways. Now, right up the road from Old Faithful is another iconic place, and that's Grand Prismatic Hot Springs. It's one of the largest hot springs in the world, and it is such a visually striking scene out there. It's a really good example of how the different thermophiles in there, the different species, grow in different temperatures and cause different colors to form around the center of this in concentric circles. Typically, when you see a hot spring and you get towards the center of it, or wherever the source is, it's coming out of the ground where it's the hottest, it's going to be a really bright turquoise blue or clear. The cleaner the water looks, the closer to boiling point it is, because there's not as many, if any, thermophiles that can actually live in the water temperature that high. And then as you work your way out and the water starts to cool off, you get different species that form, and that's where you get the white and the yellow and the orange and the brown rings. And it's really a sight to behold. And this site, much like Old Faithful, there's a boardwalk around that. There's a couple really cool hot springs that you can see, and right along that boardwalk as well is Excelsior Geyser, which has a really cool history behind it. It's another really cool spot, and you can sit and just watch the water run from these hot springs down the hillside and form these awesome little waterfalls going down into the Firehole River that I could just sit there and watch all day. It's such an alien environment to just be sitting on the side of the river and see all of this steaming water pouring off the sides and all of the steam coming off of the hot springs up the hill. It's just the coolest thing ever. Now, also in this same area, you've got the paint pots area. And this is another spot where there's a boardwalk that kind of goes off the beaten path a little bit. Another area where there's a lot of hot springs. It's the best place, too, to see mud pots. You don't see very many of them. And in this particular area, you can get right up close on top of them. It's a really cool feature where really hot acidic water comes up and dissolves the rock. And you can just sit back, watch it boiling, and watch the gases escape from it. And there's a dynamic with it. Typically out here in Yellowstone, it tends to get drier the closer you get to fall and winter. So that's when the mud pots out here are going to be the thickest. They're going to be the most dynamic. And in the springtime, with the snow melts and there's more groundwater available, the mud pots do thin out quite a bit. Also in the area close to here, there's a couple different fumaroles that you can get really close to. And there's a couple pretty dynamic smaller geysers a little bit further down the boardwalk. They're always fun to go see and pretty reliable. Typically, you don't have to wait too long for one of these on either side of you to really start going off and get to see them in action. Now, another really interesting spot that you'll see that I need to mention is Roaring Mountain. And all this is a hillside where there's several fumaroles coming out from it. And it gets its name because at certain times, if enough pressure builds up, you can really hear that sound echoing off the mountainside. But this is another example of fumaroles. And all this is places where water gets underground and it gets in contact with superheated rock and it flash boils, and that steam just finds its way through cracks in the rocks and comes out the side of the mountain. Now, another iconic scene out here is Mammoth Hot Springs. This is just a fantastic place, absolutely amazing. There is a hot spring up on top, and you can see where it's dissolved the minerals as it's coming down, and it forms these small terraces and pools, and it is always changing. You can sit back and just watch the water running off the sides of it, and you can show up there one day and a month later come back and a new terrace be there, another one eroded away. The layers of travertine coming down are just absolutely breathtaking. And just like you see with the smaller hot springs where you'll have the hot acidic water coming up and reacting with the rock in that area, forming different features, this is just that same dynamic on a massive scale. Not only can you see it from the huge white front of the hill there, there's a boardwalk off to the side, off to the north side of it, where you can get up and get right up next to the terraces, and you can just see that stunning white and brown rock through there. And you can always tell the newer material because they're bright white. You'll always see where the new material is coming down on there. And then if you make a short drive south of there, you can actually get on top, and there's terraces around the top that you can drive on. Just such an amazing thing to see. Again, this is one of those things, pictures and videos will never do it justice. You really got to be out there next to these things to appreciate how big and how unique they really are. Now, as many times as I've been through that park, and as much time as I spend out there chasing wildlife around, there are still some days where I just kind of put my gear away, take a break, and I'll go sit up by Mammoth Hot Spring and just sit there and be there in the moment. A lot of these other places, you can just pull off the side of the road and just sit there and feel like you're on an entirely different planet. It's the coolest thing. And again, like I said, pictures and videos really don't do it much justice. It's one of those things where you've got to have boots on the ground and be standing right in front of these things to actually appreciate the grandeur and the uniqueness of this amazing area that we've got to work with out here. So if you enjoyed taking this little trip through the geothermal features of Yellowstone with me, I'm going to put 2 videos in the end screen. The latest one is our last time up in Hayden Valley with the wolf pack and a couple grizzly bears. Had a really fun day out there with that. The other video that I'll put in is going to go into a little bit of what my everyday carry is when I'm out in the parks and some of the camera equipment that I use, and we also have a cool little experience with a coyote out there. So don't forget, guys, jump down, like the videos, throw down in the comments anything you'd like to see, any questions you've got, and get subscribed to the channel. We're firing this thing back up, and we are going to be following up with a lot of content here over the next few months, so you definitely won't want to miss it. You guys have an outstanding day, and we will see you next time on Intrepid Photography.